nutrient needs, young children need to eat frequent small meals and nutrient-dense meals, or nutrient-dense foods. When we talk about nutrient-dense foods, basically we're talking about foods that are, they're foods that are dense in nature, meaning they have multiple macronutrients in them. So when I think of nutrient-dense, and this is not just because my husband is a dairy farmer, but I think of milk and dairy products because they have both good carbohydrates and then also protein. So it makes them nutrient-dense in that nature. Energy needs for young kids is anywhere from 1,000 to 1,600 calories per day. Appropriate portion sizes, think about this at home. What we do at home, especially at this age, they are going to continue on for life. So if we serve them portion sizes that are on large plates, they're going to start looking at that and seeing, oh, well, I have space on my plate, I need to fill it up. So when we talk about portion sizes for kids, we want to think about child-sized plates, even the little portion plates, because if you do the little portion plates, then they can really see what the portions are, and you can put the different foods in the different sections, so they can kind of make that notation of, oh, yes, this is a fruit, it's in this portion, okay? Mini-sized food items, so if you're doing like a bagel, let's say you're having breakfast and everybody's having bagels at the table. If they're toddlers, you should really think about those little mini bagels, okay? Even just slicing one in half, they still get that notion, I see the big bagel, that's what I'm getting. So if you do the mini-sized bagels with them, they'll start making that connection with serving sizes. A rule of thumb for kids this age is to serve a tablespoon of food per year of age at a meal. Okay, so when they're under the age of 1, tablespoon-wise, we think about less than a tablespoon at a time. Okay, because they just cannot digest that, so they can't break it down as quickly as we can. Some food safety things, think about choking hazards. That's normally always on our mind. But especially things like hot dogs, nuts and seeds at this age, meats, if you're giving them meat, cheese, those things, just make sure that they're cut up so that they can easily swallow them. And then of course grapes, and even raisins. You wouldn't think that raisins, because they are pretty small, the thing with raisins are they're dry, so their body actually has to really get it wet and process it before, and of course most of the time they're shoving more grapes in their mouth at one time than just one. So trying to just keep that in mind when you're doing those things. And obviously hard candy, gum, those things shouldn't be given to them at a young age. And then raw vegetables, basically just cut them up. So make them small so that they can chew those. So nutrient needs, ages 1 to 3 years. When we talk about carbohydrates, it's really the same thing as you and I. About 50% of our overall calories in a day should come from carbohydrate sources, and of that, at least half of those should be whole grain. Why do we preach whole grain? Basically, think of it as a time release pill, because whole grain carbohydrates, your body actually has to break them down. It takes them longer to break them down, so you get that energy burst at certain times. Whereas if I just ate a white piece of bread right now, my body would, if I'm going to use that energy right now, it would use it instantly, or it's going to process it and put it away for storage for later. Okay? So really focus on those whole grains, especially at a young age. Fiber recommendations for this age, 19 grams for 1 to 3 years of age, and then ages 4 to 8 years, 25 grams of fiber. Then when we talk about protein, right now we live in that world of still the high protein diet, so we really focus on making sure we get a lot of protein. And the thing is a lot of kids, even all the way up to high schoolers, they get more protein in their diet per day than they actually need. And unlike carbohydrates and fats, when we talk about proteins, our bodies do not have very much storage for extra protein. So basically, when we bring in protein, we only need what our body can actually utilize in a day. Whereas carbohydrates and fats, we can store those away for energy later on. So when you're talking about protein for this age, it's really minor. I mean, it's 1.1 gram per kilogram. Kilogram, yes, us in the dietetic and medical field, we still talk kilograms. But basically, 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So if you can think about that, it's normally about half of their pound weight. RDA for school age is 0.95 grams per kilogram. So you can see a difference. Toddlers need a little bit more protein all the way up till 5 years of age. They're still developing brain, part of their brains, part of their other organs, and they need that protein to really help with that process. And then when we come to healthy fats and fats in general, really it's the same as you and I. You can see ages 2 to 3, they do have the 30 to 35% of calories from fat. And then at age 4, they can actually cut down 25% to 35%. And again, the fat recommendations for ages 2 to 3 goes directly back to brain development, organ development, tissue development. Calcium needs at this age, obviously they're necessary for healthy bone development. Ages 1 to 3 years need 500 milligrams per day, and 8 ounces roughly gives you 300 milligrams. So 1 glass of milk will give you almost all but 200 milligrams of what you need in a day for a 1 to 3 year old. When it comes to iron, it's necessary during periods of rapid growth. So when they're infants, of course, we always talk about if you're doing formula, it's the iron fortified formulas at that time. And that's because they really need that iron during those rapid growth periods. Good sources, when they're able to eat solid foods, include lean meats, beans, and then iron fortified cereals, which pretty much any cereal these days are iron fortified. When we were younger, not so much, but these days they are. And then of course, when it comes to cow's milk, unfortunately there's not a high iron source in cow's milk, or really any milk in that nature. It's iron mostly comes from your meats as far as high sources, and some vegetables as well. Vitamin D, this is actually an area that's still of concern. It used to be we really didn't have to worry too much about vitamin D, and now all of a sudden we're starting to see some rickets come back, which is actually kind of scary for us here in America. But the American Academy of Pediatrics, they're really pushing the recommendations for vitamin D. Ages 1 to 8 years, they need to consume 10 micrograms of vitamin D per day. Where they can get that is through fortified milk, and then of course egg yolks, and then some fish. If there's a child that just cannot have milk or eggs due to allergy purposes, obviously there's great vitamin D supplements that you can also get in to make sure they're getting their vitamin D. Young children need nutrient-dense beverages, so when we talk about beverages, really think about at this age, water and milk are preferred beverages for toddlers, and then 100% fruit juice, basically in moderation. Obviously when they're infants all the way up to even 2 years, we try not to push juice at that time, just simply because they get used to, oh, this fruit juice tastes really good, and then they don't like the fruit. So trying to limit the fruit juice is ideal. And then soda and sugary drinks, try to avoid them if all possible. I know when I was a kid, I recognize now I drank way too much pop. I mean, it almost makes me ill to think how many sodas I went through in a day. And now to see my kids, we just don't have it in the house, and they don't ask for it. So it's kind of a good thing when you don't have it in the house. They're really not going to beg you for it. So try and think about some of those small changes if you see that happening in your house. Food behaviors, eating habits form early in life, so start thinking about some of the things even we do as parents. I know one thing I always laugh about is raisins. I don't know what happened when I was little, but I absolutely hate raisins. I do not like them. So when my oldest asked me, hey mom, why don't we ever have raisins in the house? I said, well, probably need to start doing that, because just because I don't like them doesn't mean they won't like them. So that to me was an eye-opener of, just because I don't like a food, I should not have that spill over to my kids. So we have raisins in the house now. So start thinking about some of those things that you don't like, but really try to see if your kids, they may like it. Variety of food, so making sure that you really try to bring in a variety of things. Fruits and vegetables are typically the area we may not have much variety in, so really challenge yourself to try new things. A child does need to be exposed to a new food at least 10 times before accepting it. And that's typically hard for us as parents, because if you're like me and you get home, you're making a meal, you want to sit down, get that meal ate, get them in bed. Sometimes you're really just pushing and you just want to throw something out that they're going to eat. So really try and have that patience with them and keep trying to introduce them to new foods. Some division of responsibility. Parents, we are the what, when, and where the food is offered, and then of course the child is whether or not to eat and how much. And then of course, when we were growing up, or at least I know my parents were pretty big at this, because I know my younger brother sat at that table until his food was gone, and many times that was almost 9 o'clock at night, which was crazy. But cleaning the plate, we really don't want to encourage that, because studies are starting to show that it does actually lead towards overeating or disordered eating later in life. So just really think about that before we tell them to clean their plate completely. Food preferences, we kind of already talked about this, but we do have a strong influence over our children's food. So just make sure that we're trying to look at our behaviors and see what we do. I also think about this a lot on the side of where I talk to eating disorder clients. A lot of them, when you talk to them, there are things that they saw their parents do when they were younger, and they started trying those things. So, if we're always talking about being on a diet all the time, they're going to start thinking, oh goodness, I need to be on a diet. So even just some of those words that we use at home, just use them with caution. And then of course, always include your young children in food shopping. Menu planning, meal preparation. I started making videos with my son because he loves to cook with me. And so now we do little Heath videos where he helps me make pizza, or he helps me make spaghetti. And the bad thing is now he thinks he always has to be on video. But it really made him aware of, I like to cook with mom, so he's always in the kitchen with me. So. And having 4 sisters, he's either going to like being around girls or not, but I want to make sure he can cook at least when he gets out of the house, so, because his dad can't cook very well. Picky eating and food jags, these are common in young children. So if you have a picky eater, don't worry. Even people, I have a picky eater and I'm a dietitian and it drives me nuts, So picky eaters, you're always going to have at least one in the house. So basically a picky eater is one that doesn't want to try a new food at all, and then one that has what's called a food jag. They have a tendency to eat only small selections of food, okay? And these may change throughout their life. I know that I had a food jag when she was little, and now she eats large portions and it goes back for seconds and thirds, okay? Picky eating, those are things that you really just have to be patient with, honestly, because a lot of times that picky eater will end up, it takes something for them to switch. You never know what it's going to be, but it will work itself out in the long run. But just know they're very common, they're very normal. There are actually support groups for parents that have picky eating, so if you're to that point where you're about ready to throw yourself into a wall because you don't know what else to do, let me know, because there are support groups for it. Vegetarianism, I just put this slide in because at this age, a lot of times we start worrying because they may not like meats or they might have limited protein variety, and it's simply because of the texture thing at this age. So just know that even if they are eating more things like beans, nuts, seeds, those types of things, they're still getting protein through those. Even whole grains, they're getting some protein source through those. If you do follow a vegetarian diet, that's completely fine. Just make sure you're really trying to get those multiple servings of all food groups other than those protein sources that you exclude in your vegetarian diet. And then, of course, think about good sources of calcium and iron and zinc and you may need to supplement vitamin B12, just simply because some of those foods that you may not have in your diet may be high in vitamin B12, so you may not be getting all of that through the food. So just a quick review, toddlers grow at a slower rate than infants and have smaller appetites. Frequent small meals are ideal. Small portion sizes should be encouraged. Don't encourage the cleaning plate. And then of course, like I said, the picky eaters, the food jags, those are normal and usually temporary. So school age kids, which I know most of you guys have school age kids here, that's ages 6 to 12. They are not fully grown yet. Each year they're gaining about 7 pounds and then 2.5 inches. Granted, you know, when boys and girls at this age, normally girls actually typically grow faster during this age, and then they start slowing off come 13, okay? And then that's when the boys start picking up. So it's really fun to kind of see where your child falls. Then compared to toddlers and preschoolers, they don't eat as many times per day, although I beg to differ there with a couple of mine. They do tend to be less hungry, and that's basically because they're able to maintain their blood glucose longer. So sometimes you might be sitting there reminding them to eat, and that's just simply because their bodies, at that age, they can do different things. And you know, their metabolism at that age may not be running as fast as some. Obviously, though, there's some kids that they have a high metabolism, so they can eat more food at each setting, and sometimes they'll challenge you with that. They can impact healthy development through dietary choices, and then of course continue to develop habits based on modeling adult behaviors. In all honesty, I feel like this age is more of a sponge as far as them really paying attention to what you do, more so than even the toddlers. At this age, they do start thinking about child obesity. So if you do go in for your, annual checkups, their 5-year, 6-year, 10-year, they will start talking about BMI. Basically, they graduate from the growth chart, and now they start looking at height versus weight. So overweight at this age, if they do go off the growth chart, it would be anything over 95th percentile. Then they might start talking to you about considerations of increasing activities with those kids. At risk for overweight is anything over the 85th percentile. Why is childhood, or what is considered childhood obesity? Basically, it's a condition of a child having too much body weight for his or her height. There's a lot of research right now around this age group, 6 to 12 years, because what we've learned through the years is that BMI is still not the best indicator at this age. There are some kids that they actually will start developing and get more muscle bound starting at this age, and then they start shooting up come 12, 13 years, and so their BMI really at that time has a huge shift. And there's been a lot of research around just the whole diagnosing childhood obesity at a young age and how that has an impact on their life and could turn the opposite and go towards a disordered eating. So, you know, if your pediatrician or family doctor brings this up, just know that they're doing it because they have to make you aware of those things, but there's an easy way to change it, and a lot of times the kids will actually at this age start working themselves out of it when they start growing. Obesity, there is a small genetic portion to it, and actually it's getting more. I think the upcoming research is going to show that that small percentage is going to be more like a medium percentage when it comes to genetics. Environment, of course, there is an environment factor there, excess calories and inadequate exercise. And then nutrition, even before they were born, a lot of times they're tying things back to that with childhood obesity. If we think about excess calories, so things that we can pay attention to and have an impact on our kids in our home, just think about how much soda and candy bars, potato chips, those types of things that are high in calorie but not nutrient dense. Try and limit those at home. The good thing is of course in our schools now, Vending machines in elementary schools, they're pretty well out. I mean, I know we never did have any when we were kids, and now there are rules against vending machines. Basically, they have to have healthy snacks and healthy beverages in them. So that's basically helping shape those habits in that nature. And then, of course, thinking about convenience stores and how many times we may go there and get drinks. And then typically replace healthy options, so use milk, water, fresh fruit. You can put fresh fruit in water. Some of those beverages that are just lower in calorie. And then portion sizes. Think about portion sizes when we're serving at home. Start with smaller portion sizes, and then if they eat everything and ask for more, at that point you can give them more. That helps them see and recognize proper portion sizes. And we pretty much covered that. Sugar, did any of you guys go to the ADHD talk before this? Yeah? So this is, and I don't know if you touched on this or not, but this has been the most current research for us as dietitians, is trying to link sugar to attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. All the research has come back to say there is no link to them at all. However, I do know that the research is continuing. They're actually looking at some caffeine as well, because some people that have ADHD, they use caffeine to actually calm them down. So it has that reverse factor on them. So it's kind of a hot topic. I'm excited to see what other research they have out. But currently, just by eating too much sugar, it does not have an effect on ADHD, but of course we know we should limit the amount of sugar that we have anyway. All right. Some preventative things. Parents need to ensure that children receive adequate nutrients without excess calories, a variety of healthy foods, and then screen time. That's a big thing when we talk about childhood obesity. We have phones these days, we have iPads these days, you name it, we have it for screen time. So really being cautious and making sure the TV is being turned off. I catch myself on the weekend, after working a long week and you have a Saturday where you have nothing, you just want to veg out, right? So I've caught myself even a few times just sitting there, on the computer or something, and my kids are like doing this to me, let's get outside. So it goes both ways. If you spend a lot of time on your phone and on your computer, they recognize that too. So make sure you're making an effort to get outside with your kids. Treatment for obesity, again, at this age, really what they encourage is physical activity. So they don't encourage to go on a diet at this age. It's more of increase that activity and make sure you're balancing out what's being brought in food and nutrients, and then the activity to burn off those nutrients and the food that you're bringing in. This is just a great little table, and these slides, if you guys want them, I can email them to you. Actually, I'm going to email them to Janine so you guys can have access. But this is a neat little table. It's called TASTE, and basically it's a way to increase fruits and vegetables in the family meal. Why the focus is still on fruits and vegetables, it's not that they want you to focus on all I need is fruits and vegetables and nothing else. It's because research still shows that we are low in our fruit and vegetable intake. So the T stands for try something new at every eating occasion, whether that be I'm putting shredded carrots in a casserole, or maybe I'm making a fruit smoothie or something different. A stands for all forms of fruits and veggies count, so it doesn't matter if it's cooked, it doesn't matter if it's raw. Every once in a while you can do the 100% juice. It does still count as a fruit and a veggie. Shop smart, so start thinking about when I buy produce, buy it in season, okay? And then of course, clean and cut up the produce as soon as you get home, because if you don't, a lot of times it sits there in the fridge and then it goes bad. So nobody is eating it at that point. The T is to turn into a family activity, so think about getting your families involved with shopping as well as cooking. And then E is explore a bountiful variety. So think about when you go on a shopping trip, taking them through the produce section, talking about new produce and different produce, and then try different things. All right, type 2 diabetes in kids. We kind of like obesity in children, type 2 diabetes has been popping up. It has been for the past 10 years. Before I got out of the hospital portion of my career, I know I was on a diabetic floor and I saw my youngest kid at the age of 5 with type 2 diabetes. Typically, when I would have 4-year-olds, it was type 1. And so that was one of those things, and that was before I had kids, just kind of really hitting me that, you know, Kansas is not, we are the same as the nation as far as when we talk about obesity and diabetes. It's occurring in our kids. So just be aware of it. If you have a family history of diabetes, know that and recognize that so that you can start, you know, seeing any signs in your kids, or just making steps to make sure that keeping that variety and making sure we're exercising and getting good, well-balanced diets. And then school-age kids and dental hygiene, 42% of children and adolescents ages 6 to 19, they have at least one cavity or filling. So start thinking about, you know, talk about good oral hygiene, think about things that would cause or could cause cavities, like your high sugar foods, your soda, fruit juice. Try and limit the consumption of those. Granted, there's also a genetic factor here, because if you had parents that had bad teeth, unfortunately, you're typically going to have them as well. That's where I fall into. I got my dad's wonderful teeth, so I think I had my first cavity at like 5 years old, and I didn't even have candy at that point. It was just, I unfortunately got that gene from him. So make sure that we think about those foods, and then make sure we talk to our kids about brushing, flossing, all that great stuff. My Pyramid for Kids, I know we don't technically teach this anymore, but we do still have My Pyramid, because it really encourages kids on activity. Our new Choose My Plate, it really kind of left out activity, which as a dietitian I think that's unfortunate, because it's really more focused on all food and not the activity portion of it. But just really encourage the kids to understand healthy eating and activity. And for time's sake, we're going to sneak to, do want to touch on the National School Lunch Program. Granted, we have the school lunch program, and Cheney has a school breakfast program as well. They do follow the guidelines for Americans when it comes to dietary guidelines. That got put into place back in 2010, which technically we should have always been following those guidelines, but it's nice to see that we now are. So a great way, if you are in a pinch and you want to get your kids out the door for breakfast in the morning, they do have breakfast, and then of course a balanced meal for lunch, and they're very affordable. So, role of breakfast: eating breakfast may be associated with healthy body weight among children and adolescents. Studies continue to show that time and time again. They've been doing that research for a good 12 years now, and really it hasn't changed much. Also, what eating breakfast can benefit is cognitive function and memory. So sending your child to school on an empty stomach could cause them not to absorb what they're learning or what they're being taught until they eat their lunch. So think about that. And a breakfast, honestly, it does not have to be a huge breakfast. A good protein source, a carbohydrate source, and some type of a fruit. Okay, something like that, just to get them out the door and get some energy in them. Makes a huge difference. And especially the psychosocial function, it does help their emotion and their mood. And when they're happy, they're actually going to learn better. When they're down and out, they just don't have that capability to bring in everything that they're trying to teach them at that time. All right, adolescents, this is the last group. So ages 9 to 19, changes here. Of course, you're going to have, like I said before, there's still growth spurt for both girls and boys. But of course, the boys, that's where they start getting that height. The girls' height starts kind of leveling out. Weight increases due to bone growth. And then, of course, lean body mass. This is where if your child, like I said before, if they were kind of pushing the envelope when it came to the 95th percentile for BMI at the 6 to 12 years of age, they hit that height increase. That's where that lean body mass starts shifting. You really see it, honestly, in all kids. And then, of course, for our daughters, we start seeing, and thinking about the hormonal changes that go on and some of the things, energy needs that go on with that. And of course, a healthy diet is still necessary at this time. This is going to be the toughest group to really have an impact on. And why I say that is just because they get to that age where, you know, they know everything and you may not know as much as they do. So you really have to start thinking about, how do I show them at home what a healthy diet looks like? By showing them that and maybe not talking to them about that, that's where they're going to start resonating. Versus if you harp on them about a healthy diet, then they're going to completely do the opposite of what you're saying. Some nutrition-related behaviors, they do have that desire for independence and individuality. I see this a lot as in my new role, I try to make it out to all 6 schools that I'm over. And so I'll serve in the high school at least once a week, and then I'll go over to the elementary school and just kind of sit there. And it's so interesting to see the middle schoolers, so your 7th and 8th graders, if one girl in particular says, oh, I want green beans, well then their 3 friends after them want the green beans. But if somebody says, oh no, I don't like green beans, everybody else's hand goes down, like, hey, I don't want green beans either. So it really does have an impact. It's that, you know, desire to be wanted and have that connection with their friends. So that peer pressure really plays into their choices here. And of course, having their own transportation to access food, that's big. So you might have a great meal at home, but they say, I can drive, I don't want to eat your food, I'm going elsewhere. So they do have a little bit of challenges there as parents for this age. Then of course, like I said, influence of peers, media is another huge thing. And then of course, other role models that may not be the best role models for them. Unfortunately, media continues to make us think about body image and get that picture in our mind of what we feel we need to be. It's getting a little bit better, but it's still out there. So exposure to unrealistic or unsafe eating practices can be seen still to this day. And then it could lead to an adoption of some damaging habits like eating disorders, those types of things. Of course, at this age, when they have that peak bone mass, you really have to start looking at or hopefully encouraging them to continue to get a good source of calcium in their diet. This is the age, especially for girls and boys, they'll start decreasing their milk intake as well as other dairy foods that are high in calcium, and bone mass starts to go and hurt from that. We get a lot of stress fractures at this age. We get a lot of broken bones at this age. Yes, it might be because they're very active out on the sports field or whatever they're doing, but a lot of it is because their calcium intake has gone down and their bones literally are not as strong as what they were when they were younger. So really start thinking about or helping guide them to those products that are high in calcium. If they just absolutely will not drink milk or dairy food, then start thinking about vitamins, calcium supplements, all those great things. Girls especially at this age, because they will go through calcium pretty quickly for a lot of different reasons, but make sure that they have